Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to do a wrap up of everything that I've been reading over the last few months. The last one I think I did earlier in the year, sort of March time I want to say, so I will link that up in a card if you didn't see that one. But I've just filmed a video of some books that I've recently hauled over the last few weeks, from Vinted, eBay and just other bits and pieces I've picked up. Not a terrible lot, but I thought I would just show you. So again, that video is on my channel, so make sure you check that out. But I wanted to do a roundup, mini reviews of quite a few books that I've read since kind of February, March time. I think I might do a very individual book review for one of them, just because I have a lot to talk about on that one. But yeah, I've got my trusty book journal. This is the Martha Brooke Just One More Page book journal. It's not sponsored or anything, but this is what I've been using this year to keep track on. I think I showed this more in that last wrap up, so make sure you go and see that. But yeah, this is where I document all my reviews as well as Goodreads. My Goodreads is always linked down below, so that's the best place to follow me if you want like very up-to-date updates. So I'm going to start backwards and then try and work my way forwards, so I can try and remember as much as possible. So I think we left off on The Dilemma by B.A. Paris. I did touch on that in the last video and I gave that 4 stars. So the next one I read was Body in the Library, or The Body in the Library by Agatha Christie. This is a beautiful edition I picked up when we were in America last year from Barnes & Noble. No, Books A Million. And yeah, so this is about a very glamorous lady that ends up one day in the library of this Mr. and Mrs. who have a very sort of grand house, and none of them have ever seen her before, no idea who this woman is that has died in their library. I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. This is a Miss Marple, and I felt like there wasn't a lot of Marple in it, if I'm honest. My review was very short on this one. I can always tell the books that I thoroughly enjoy because like both double sides of the book are just covered in notes. But yeah, I've put there wasn't a lot of Marple. This felt a little bit slow for me, and I didn't really warm to any of the characters, so it was a 3 out of 5 stars. I am just slowly working my way through Agatha Christie books. Wasn't one of my favourites, but the cover's cute, so yeah. And with all these are just my individual opinion. Doesn't mean you're not going to like this. I'll read the back of it. It says it's 7 in the morning. The Bantries wait to find the body of a young woman in their library. She is wearing an evening dress and heavy makeup, which is now smeared across her cheeks. But who is she? How did she get there? And what is the connection with another dead girl, whose charred remains are later discovered in an abandoned quarry? The respectable Bantries invite Miss Marple into their home to investigate amid rumours of scandal. She baits a clever trap to catch a ruthless killer. So it's not a very long book, it's only 200 pages, so if you're looking for a quick Agatha Christie book to get through, then you might enjoy it, but I did find it kind of slow. Next book I did not find slow at all, and I gave this 5 stars, and this is Last One to Die. I picked this up in Tesco forever ago in the like kids YA section, and this is about a young girl who originally is from Ireland, who moves to London to do like a summer acting course, I believe, and when she's there, trouble just follows her. So there's all these deaths and attacks on all these young girls, and the common theme is that all these girls kind of look like our main character. So I put, she moves from Ireland to London to do a summer drama programme. Little does she know she's been watched, and danger, even murder, seems to follow her. I found this really fast paced, really interesting. I don't read a ton of YA anymore, purely like I don't relate to it as much anymore, just being in my mid-20s now. And I put that in my thing. Due to the thriller nature, I didn't feel like I had to try and relate to the characters of that younger age. Kept me gripped from the start, and each murder and attack was just really brutal, really gripping, really quite gritty. The ending wasn't completely unpredictable, but there was a twist at the end which I didn't see coming. There was like a mythical element to it in the end as well. And what I've put in this is don't trust anyone in this book. So keeps you on your toes, very much so. So if that's something that interests you, there's a little bit of romance, but not enough, because I don't read any rom-coms, like that's not my thing. But there's a little bit of romance to like wet your toes into it. Yeah, very gripping. If you're looking for a YA thriller, I'd suggest picking this one up. And I've actually at the bottom got who would I recommend this to, and anyone that loves City of Bones. So that gives you a little glimpse. The mythical magical element I wouldn't say really comes into effect until very much towards the end of the book. So next I read Mary Poppins by p.l.travers. I've read this in the past. It's the book that started off Mary Poppins. If you've seen the film about p.l.travers that Disney did, it basically shows how Walt Disney went to p.l.travers and tried to acquire the rights to turn her book into a film. So it's always really interesting to read where everything came from, what it was inspired the film. These came out in like the 1930s. I read this one, and then I read Mary Poppins Comes Back. There's about 5 of these books in total, I think. These are just such gorgeous copies and striped covers. These are really quick, easy to fly through as an adult. Obviously if you're reading them to kids it might take a bit longer, but they have very sort of small individual chapters. The first one is obviously the favourite and where everything started, but you kind of forget how different the film is to the books. You know, you don't, so far in the first 2 I've read, you don't get a ton of Bert in the books. There's not a lot of similarities between the book and the film, aside from, you know, Mary Poppins comes along and the actual family. The family themselves have another set of twins. In the next book they end up having another child, so it's not just Jane and Michael. Like I said, Bert is not as heavily featured as he is in the film. There is all these very crazy little elements to it. I'd say the books are more like the theatre show, in that mythical magical element to it. Yeah, I'm flying through these. I just pick one up every now and again until I've read them all. The next book I read was Stephen King's The Institute, and I think this is the second Stephen King book I've read, and I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. There was just something about the ending that wouldn't let me give it 5 stars. I have a ton of notes, so I'm just going to quickly read this and summarise it for you. So this is about a boy called Luke who one night gets kidnapped and taken away by these mysterious, feels like gang members, but they obviously work for the Institute, and they collect kids in the middle of the night. They kill their parents, and these are kids that have extraterrestrial power, shall we say, so telekinesis and telepathic elements, so they can read minds or move objects, and the Institute sort of collect them, test on them, and for a long time in this book we're unaware of why they are trying to take these kids, what are their bigger powers, what are they trying to gain from these kids' abilities, what are they trying to train them for. And at the very start of this book we're actually introduced to another character called Tim, who is what they call a night knocker. So the start of the book it's weird because we have this whole chapter of Tim as he goes to this small town, he becomes part of the police force, and then it jumps into the story with Luke, and then we hear from then on about Luke and his time in the Institute. It's not until like the last couple of 100 pages that we're reintroduced back into Tim, and you kind of forget by the time you've got there who Tim ever was, and that whole chapter in the beginning, you kind of have to like re-jog your memory. But I really enjoyed this book. It very much had Hunger Games vibes to it, in the sense that there's these kids that have been taken by this higher power. It's kind of a fight for survival. Luke befriends one of the other younger kids there called Avery, and his relationship was very familiar to me as being that of Katniss and Rue from the Hunger Games. Same sort of feel. And I felt was a little over the top. It kind of like, everything felt quite realistic until kind of the end, where it was just like, what? And I think that was a really good way. Stephen King obviously you know, we don't know what is out there, but it was really interesting how he managed to make this all sound really quite believable, and like a possibility it could be going on somewhere, but at the end it kind of felt a bit over the top, and I felt like I wanted to know more about the character's life after the Institute. And I've put those that like the Hunger Games or Stranger Things, you'll probably like this book. And I also want to put the people that sort of like ran this institute, I felt like they got off very lightly. Various different outcomes to their endings, but I thought they just all sort of got the easy way out, which I didn't like. So that was a contributing factor to why I only gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And this took me sort of close to a month to read. Like, I wasn't like dying every night to sit and read it. Like, I did, and I was drawn back to it, but it wasn't the quickest of reads for me. I mean, it's quite a long book, so that probably contributed. The next book I read was Ready to Go Steady, which is a Happy Days book by William Johnston. I love the show Happy Days, and when I found that you could get a series of books, I have the first 2, I was really interested in reading them. These are just like watching the programme, like you really get the characters feel in the book, and this is about, mainly follows Richie through summer break. He's got a new job, and he's like the only one out of his friends that have got a job for the summer, and there's also this love interest with a new neighbour that moves in, and yeah, I found this a really very quick read. The humour translated well through it. I would say it's very heavily like Richie focused. There is no Fonz in this book despite the picture on the front, and I feel like I would have liked more of the Fonz, but I feel had Fonz in it, Richie wouldn't have made the decisions that he had, which is the main element of this book. Yeah, so let me read the back to you. Richie saunters down the street headed for his first day at a full-time summer job. Boy, does he feel manly and full of himself. Suddenly he spies Emma, the new girl on the block. Emma is a knockout and the woman of his dreams. Richie is in love. The calm of the Cunningham household is quickly shattered. We're off and laughing. Emma and Richie plunge into their summertime romance and are soon going steady. Richie's love for Emma is boundless. His imagination soars. Contemplation? Marriage? Wouldn't it be great to come home to Emma, welcoming arms every night? Join in the contagious side-splitting hilarity with Richie, his family, and the whole bee-bopping gang from the Happy Days. So yeah, very much Richie focused, and like I said, there's an element of will they get married in it. And had Fonz been in it, I feel like there would be no sort of existence for this book, because I feel he would have kind of talked him out of it. So yeah, really light-hearted read. If you can get your hands on a copy, then I would totally recommend it. The next book I read was Just After the Wave by Sandrine Colette, who I believe is a French author, and this is kind of a natural disaster apocalyptic style book, in the sense that this family live in a house on a hill, and one day the wave comes and the wave pretty much floods everything in the local facility, and because they live on such a high hill, they're the only kind of family, as far as they're aware, to survive. There is the parents, and they have 9 kids, 8 kids, and because of this wave, they have to decide, okay, we're going to have to look for higher land, other people, see what is out there, and the parents have to choose who they can take with them out of their 8 kids, because their boat is not big enough to take them all, and they end up leaving 3 children on the island to kind of fend for themselves with an uncertainty. So this was really interesting, like the concept behind it, the natural disaster, I found really interesting to read. There was a lot of frustration with this, because the father made the main decision of the kids they were taking, and yes, while I really understood who he took and for the reasons why, I felt like the mother should have stayed behind with these 3 kids. I feel like the kids shouldn't have been left on their own, and I just feel like the kids were too young to be left on their own. They all, I think, were probably sort of under 10, and I feel like they could have benefited from maybe an older sibling being there, or the mother. And like I said, I get the reason why he had to leave those three behind and why he made the choices he did, but it didn't sit well with me. This book was very elusive. Like, we don't really know where in the world this book was set. There was no sort of features, geographic features that could kind of allude us towards it. There was a moment where there was a monster in the waters and we can only assume that it's a shark. Like, that's kind of what our mind goes to. But it could have been a whale, we're not sure. But yeah, and I've put, it's a tale of loss, survival, grief and sacrifice. So I did enjoy this book. I gave it 3 stars, but it wasn't like the best sort of dystopian, apocalyptic book I've read. And finally, the last book, which I think I might do a standalone book review on, is From Green to Blue by Jonathan Cox. This was a gifted book. My dad actually knows the author himself, and he reached out to me and said, would you like to read it and potentially review it? And I said sure. There was no obligation to review it, and to be honest, I didn't think I'd like it as much as I did. So this is a fictional book written, he is an ex-policeman, but the events at the start says it's very much all sort of fabricated. Any sort of match to a person or an event is purely coincidental. How much of that is true, I don't know. But yeah, this is a book set in the 1980s in Britain, and it's about a 19-year-old's start into the police force. He's been recently orphaned and he's sort of turned to the police force for a second chance in life. So it follows him getting into the force and being what they call puppy walked. So he's basically given a mentor called Dawn, and he has to learn the ropes from her. And like I said, I think I'm going to do a full book review on this because, spoiler, I loved it. It was 5 out of 5 stars for me. I flew through this book in about a week, which at the moment is pretty good for me. Literally took this everywhere. The chapters are really quite small, like anywhere from 3 to 10 pages, so really nice and small. Easy to sort of pick up here and there where you've only got sort of 5-10 minutes if you're waiting for something, an appointment or whatever. And yeah, it follows Chris, his time starting out, learning the ropes from Dawn. Him and Dawn do not get on from moment go. I will say I thought Dawn was a lot older than she was. I thought she was like in her 40s, but she's actually only about like 7 years older than him, in her mid-20s. Like I said, I'm going to do a full review on this, but I really enjoyed it. It was fast paced, it was funny, there is some like sexual references in it, so if that's not your thing, it's not heavily featured, but when it comes to it, it's very sort of sexual. You can tell it's been written by a man. The ending, literally, I nearly cried, which is something I'm really not a crier for books, just for whatever reason they don't hit me, but the relationship that had grown in this book between Chris and Dawn, like by the end of it, I very nearly sobbed at the ending. But yeah, I'll do a full review, so that may be up already. If it is, I'll link it in a card. If not, make sure you're subscribed, and that review will hopefully be up in the next sort of week or 2. But yeah, that is all of the books that I've read over the last couple of months. Let me know if anything sort of tickles your pickle, and if you think you might pick something up. Also, let me know what you're reading, because I'm always on the lookout for recommendations. I do have a massive cart here of books that I've yet to get to, and I feel like I kind of need to do a clean or a declutter of my TBR bookshelf, because sometimes I feel you pick things up, especially for me, sometimes I'll pick things up like in Tesco when they're on the like 2 for £9 offer, and then I don't end up reading it for months and months, and then I'm kind of like, well, actually I'm not that invested in it anymore. So I feel like I need to go through my cart again and sort of see what I really do want to read, what still sort of sparks interest in me. So yeah, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to pick up next, but hopefully it'll be another good one, because so far we've only had maybe 3 5-star books this year. In my book journal I can literally like see everything at a glance as to what I've read. Purple is obviously 5-star, and pink is 4-star. So we're doing pretty good. I've only read 1 2-star book this year and no 1-star books. It's very hard for something to only get 1 star for me. I have to really like not like it and want to skim through it. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed seeing this video, seeing what I've been reading, and I will see you in my next one. Bye guys.